How are you? Enzo DiCasanzo, clinical professor, economics and finance at St. Peter's. Oops, I'm so used to saying that, but it's the Enzo DiCasanzo podcast. Sorry, I'm on vacation too a bit. The Enzo DiCasanzo podcast. This is number 7. This is number 7 that we're looking at for the final exam for the spring 2023 for the graduate section and for the undergraduate section. Sorry about that. Okay, we have a couple places we could start what we're talking about for today. Well, actually, let's start here. This was the article by the economist who won the Nobel Prize for bank runs and for his study of the commercial banking system and the central banking system. So we're pretty much there. So let's finish the rest of this, and then I had planned to do a bunch of different things, but I have a feeling that we might get to maybe half of what I anticipated getting to. So anyway, so how is this different from the 2008 financial crisis? We'll get to that. It says Americans can rest assured the banking system is safe. That's at least that's what the opinion is in this, for this author. So, and for myself included. It says the investments were pretty long term. They were generating low yields. Sure. Okay. That's what Silicon Valley Bank and some of the overseas banks that we're looking at. If those banks stocked up on low yielding debt instruments to back up their deposits, and now all of a sudden, if they had to liquidate those debt instruments in a market where they're going to take a loss, obviously that's going to be a problem, and that's what Silicon Valley Bank faced, and what some of our allies overseas may be facing. It says they figured that the scenario would work fine if the depositors stayed forever, of course, and they kept accepting zero rates on the checking accounts and sub 1% on the money markets. But in that case, they could hold their bonds to maturity and get full value. The anticipation was that I suppose the people making the decisions out in California that the depositors were just going to simply behave as maybe unsophisticated folks with this and say, look, we'll accept next to nothing when other people are getting higher yields. And that's obviously not the case. So it says the strategy was to go out on the yield curve. And again, let me tell you, the media love those yield curve and maybe not. I'm sure this economist knows what it is, but the people who write some of this stuff, love to throw around yield curve and bond price and those kinds of things. But going out on the yield curve means a longer duration instrument to garner, say, an extra 0.5% on a 5-year versus a 1-year treasury. And that was obviously the mistake that was made out in California. And says the crunch came in 2022 when the yields on the 5-year treasury competing with the ones they bought just the year before jumped from under 1% to the start of the year to the mid 4% by the fall. Suddenly, Silicon Valley Bank was forced to pay 4.5% on savings, a multiple of what it offered a year previously, but it was only earning sub that number, earning below 4.5% just on its very rudimentary debt investments. As it appears before 2022 or mid-2022, Silicon Valley Bank deposit base was stable. It kept adding new customers at a pretty good clip. The existing clients kept the deposits in place. So again, using historically what happened, saying, oh, well, this is what happened previously, and we anticipate that's going to happen in the future. That's the song of the business analyst for a very long time. When rates surged, depositors who parked billions in Silicon Valley Bank checking money markets pulled the cash in pursuit of higher yields on treasuries. Silicon Valley Bank lost 8% of its deposits, and then the exodus accelerated in the winter of earlier this year. March 8, it issued an 8K. An 8K is a filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission saying that it had sold all of its available for sale bonds to raise capital and pay fleeing customers, and sought to refill its coffers via stock offering and the available for sale securities raised $21 billion, causing a pre-tax loss of about $2.5 billion or 11%. There are two fundamental problems, according to this economist out in Chicago. It says the first was the fallen value of the bonds, which I previously said that. It had long maturities compared with a deposit base that potentially had far less stable than those at JP Morgan Chase or Bank of America. The rise in rates hit the bonds and cut the capital down. It had to write down the available for sale bonds, whether they sold them or not. The management claimed it was a fire sale, but it wasn't a fire sale. And then it says those bonds were highly liquid, but the Silicon Valley Bank didn't take any discount for selling them in a hurry. Hence, it was far from the traditional disaster case where flooded deposits forces banks to jettison hard to sell assets at distressed prices. Well, he's cutting. They're cutting hairs with that. I see what he's talking about, but generally, though, when what happened a decade and a half ago, a bit was banks had to sell. To cover depositors, banks had to sell assets that were not. There wasn't such a liquid market for the instruments as opposed to today, or the savings and loan crisis in the early '80s. And again, you see this word a lot in academic literature. Post it means a statement made on the assumption it will prove true. It posts, diamond. So again, the economist posted it that even before the 8K announcement ignited the run, Silicon Valley Bank was close to insolvent and rapidly heading for failure. The cost of funding, meaning the interest they had to pay on deposits, kept rising, and they were forced to pay higher interest needed to keep the customers. But the bond portfolio, where the money comes in from, was paying less than 2%. And put simply, you're getting less than 2% on your assets and paying out, say, 5% on liabilities. That deficit of interest coming in and out meant that Silicon Valley Bank was destined for big operating losses. Now, here's how this all of these situations, someone brings in more liquidity, someone brings in, I think it was 10 billion or what. I don't know if it was for this specific bank. I added it up with all the larger banks had made a capital contribution to sort of buffer the regional banks of excess of 10 billion. It could have been more. And so obviously those banks, so with the new capital, Silicon Valley could have bought higher yielding instruments and then cushioned losses and provided capital for depositors leaving and maybe could have bought, hopefully with that capital, bought higher yielding instruments and started generating interest income that was going to cover their depositors. That was the ideal case, but they may have just had to hand over the capital without buying the instruments and generating the interest income themselves. That could have been what happened. To cover the losses, Silicon Valley needed to raise cash by shifting its longer-term maturity to its trading account. By doing so, it would have pounded its capital even harder. And in a footnote to the 8K, to this Securities and Exchange filing, Silicon Valley Bank notes that they marked their hold-to-maturity securities to market. The adjustment could have wiped out all of the book capital, and the downward adjustment on the long-term bonds carrying low rates would have even been steeper on the 3 to 5 year bonds and available for sale securities. Even if they were able to hold the whole held-to-maturity portfolio to maturity, the operating losses would eventually render the bank insolvent. It appears that they were already dead or dying before the meltdown. Again, that's according to the guy from Chicago. So it wasn't some flash, some quickly unfolding situation like Credit Suisse and like every other financial crisis we've seen. It's a while. It's not something that happens overnight. There's a long-term issue with philosophy. There's a long-term issue with direction. There's a long-term issue with performance that's been going on for a while, and people have sort of been covering it up and patching it up. But the tire bursts eventually, and that's about what happened here. It also astounds Diamond that although the Silicon Valley Bank was highly vulnerable to a rise in rates, it did little hedging to offset the obvious risk that would yield that yields would eventually jump from their historic lows. Rate hedging is practiced extensively. J.P. Morgan, some of these other places. Yeah, I want to hit this thing too, the relationship between interest rates and all. I don't know if we're gonna do that today, but we'll try to hit that at some point. And the failure to diversify the deposit base. So you had depositors, again, all very similar characteristics, sophisticated, high net worth, and I don't want to say flexible, but movable. In other words, we could move from one bank to the next if they saw a better opportunity, and we're capable of making those adjustments. It says it violated the second tenet of sound banking, attracting a broad mix of customers. He points out that the Silicon Valley Bank had extremely small portion of retail clients to balance the Silicon Valley startups and their wealthy founders. Silicon Valley Bank reportedly looked for companies that were getting venture capital funding and offered them large loans on top of the equity investment or the finance they were getting from other institutions. So they grew the business rapidly by offering financing to people who had attracted some maybe equity or debt financing from another source that will give you more. And certainly, as I just said a few minutes ago, certainly if the flow of capital is rolling out the door, it's not something that happened in January. It's building for a while. And it says these weren't programmers or teachers, but what they mean was people making $100-something thousand a year. These were people who had substantial incomes and financially sophisticated folks and players in the finance world. Almost all the deposits were wholesale, and the CFOs are quicker to pull the cash from checking accounts and grab big treasury yields than people who don't have the day-to-day awareness of how things are changing. So 48 billion in deposits departed in a single day. It was the fastest bank run in history, and the customers in Silicon Valley Community Bank all talk to one another. Pardon me. Oh, Peter Thiel, one of my favorites. To get your money out when that happens, the run will be fast and complete. Okay, that was yeah. So again, monitoring the smartest guy and the smartest guy in the room, what he's doing, Peter Thiel being one of them, and saying, well, he's out, right? We're out too. So contagions, again, the fancy words, right? The fancy words in finance and bank runs is concerned about lax regulation, the Fed's super tough policies, and of course, most mid-sized banks aren't risking the funding mismatch and all in on a single client approach that sank Silicon Valley Bank, which was one of the bigger banks out there. So they lost 48 billion in deposits in a day. So if you guys don't mind, let me find. See if we can quickly uncover it. This is this one. Yeah, let's just check out the public. What were there? Yeah, I mean, look, if you're losing, that's a quarter of your assets, right? If you had 200 billion in assets, you lost 25% of that, in a day. How could you withstand that? This was a previous. I think we discussed this previously in a previous video somewhere. Okay, yeah, that's a lot. So again, you always want to have it tips of your fingers or as best as possible the data as to what's going on here. But again, it was poor risk management, poor business strategy, funding mismatches, single client approach. Okay. And then it says the Fed's oversight of regional banks, it was far too light to prevent another blow up in the early years following the passage of Dodd-Frank. Central banks imposed the same tough annual tests on mid-sized lenders as of the likes of Wells Fargo. So Citigroup and Wells Fargo had the same tests as the banks you never heard of, the Valley Nationals and whatever it might be. But the Trump administration, it says, according to this guy, it championed the regulatory relief bill that greatly reduced the frequency and severity of the stress exams for regional banks. And so if you look at the stress test for 2022, the Fed was assessing how the bank would perform at rates of 0 to 2%, as if 2% was a high they'd ever go to in terms of interest rates. But then almost any bank would pass that. So the standard should have been 0 to 7%. And also surprised that the Fed and the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation didn't see the red flags raised by Silicon Valley Bank's slender, restless clientele and holding of low-yielding, long duration. Well, there it is. There's right there. Slender, restless clientele. In other words, people who are mobile and low-yielding, long-duration bonds. But you'd have to look at the books to really follow all that. The Fed needs to predict. Will need to predict mid-sized banks' outlook using much higher rates of interest rates and assumptions in the future. A shift that could require lenders to hold far more capital. And since marking their available for such securities to market already denting the equity, it's conceivable that the regionals will need to float equity to restore the capital. And turn announcing you need to sell stock could send depositors for the exits. So a bank saying, "Oh, by the way, we need to raise some equity financing," could be a sign that there could be trouble. It's people who are, again, just a little more aware of how finance works. The super tough Fed policy that put the banks in a difficult position. When the Fed takes rates from 1 to 5% in a year, it shouldn't be surprised that it causes trouble in the system. We spoke after he received the Nobel Prize. Have fast rising rates would hurt companies, and I had discussed that previously in our discussion about the financial sector. That a fast changing interest rate, within a year, could unearth just this kind of problem among other types of problems. And it says the Fed should be slower and more deliberate in raising rates, and in part to forestall more of these shocks to the system. So again, when you have a dramatic change in conditions, kind of a situation. So if you're swimming, or all of a sudden the waters get very rough, right? That could throw you around a bit, which is about what happened here. And then it says, what he won his words for the National Bureau of Economic Research, providing insights that form the basis of modern banking regulation. The sound management practice and regulation that he extolled in the research makes banks safe was sorely lacking in this Silicon Valley bank catastrophe. Banks get in trouble when they veer from the diamond model, which can only hope that it's not a lone case, but okay. And that the Fed's relentless march and weak regulation will produce a flurry of renegades. The Royal American credit market just as economy teeters on the brink of recession. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's just sort of what that is. So we're concerned about credit markets and shocks to the system. And yeah, I mean, those. So we between the last video, between number 6 and number 7, right, we sort of hit the hit the speed bumps on this. I want to talk about this inflation interest rate relationship at some point, but before I do that, I want to talk about the Federal Open, what that is, what the Federal Open Market Committee Bank is, and also just to make you aware, there was a press release, not a press, the Associated Press put something out that maybe want to take a peek at. So we'll maybe look at that in a little bit. But let me get through, because this, I put this on my my list of things to do here. The federal, specifically discussing the Federal Open Market Committee, because the final exam is going to be heavily based on this. Okay, this will be heavily based. So again, what is, you keep hearing me say, but FOMC, what is this? It's a branch of the Federal Reserve System. We discussed the U.S. Central Bank in previous videos that determines the direction of monetary policy, open market operations. So again, so how basically the Federal Reserve stacks or supplies capital to the commercial banks so they can lend out more capital. So basically what happens is the central bank buys from commercial banks instruments, debt instruments. The central bank has a receipt, the commercial bank has the capital to lend out. That's how that basically works. There's 12 members, 7 members, I'm saying there's we have 12 members, 7 board of governor members, and the president of the Federal Reserve of New York, and then the 4 remaining are among the 11 other reserve banks on a rotating base. So the 7 board of governors in Washington, the New York Fed president, so that's 8, and then the other 4 rotate among the other 11 reserve bank presidents. And again, whatever you hear, and again, this is 8 times a year that interest rates are altered, or at least there's an examination of whether they should be altered or not. So that's my main job is following those 8 meetings a year. The FOMC is a branch of the Federal Reserve System that determines the direction of monetary policy, specifically by directing open market operations. And again, how to stock the commercial banks with capital. Again, board of governors, 5 Federal Reserve presidents, all that. Okay, and there's 8 regularly scheduled meetings, and obviously that's gets a lot of coverage, and there's press conferences and transcripts, so we care a lot about that. The 12 members meet 8 times a year to discuss whether, and now we said it's 12, but it's also their staffs. So there's hundreds of people behind those 12 people that are working and doing research, sort of behind the scenes. It's not 100 people academic conference on macroeconomic policy, but certainly it's almost that. The 12 members meet 8 times a year, discussing changes in near-term monetary policy. A vote to change policy would result in either buying or selling government securities in the open market to promote growth of the national economy. Sure. Okay. So selling securities holds money back. Buying securities means, again, always have the direction that, the cash flow from the central bank to the commercial banks is buying. Okay. Selling securities means that the central bank is going to, pulling capital back. And the commercial banks have to march to the tune that the central bank calls for them, because that's their regulator. Members of the committee characterized as hawks, favoring tighter monetary policy, or doves, who favor stimulus, or centrists, who are somewhat in between. Okay, so the hawks mean obviously a lower interest rate person. The dove meaning, not to say a hawk is a higher interest rate person. Dove is a lower interest rate person, and the centrists is what that basically just said right there. And actually, these look like, yeah, like that is good. Powell is the guy. He's considered a moderate. Okay. There's some other position that's up for grabs here, but there's certainly it's an important piece of the puzzle here. And again, having someone like Jay Powell, who has heavy private equity experience, is a big change in sort of how this. It goes back to the Greenspan days. Greenspan was this way, was very practical minded. And Greenspan believed that the market cleared out all phony baloney situations. He believed in that, and I believe in that too. But we don't believe in that, and I don't know if we really believe in that anymore. With how involved we are in following, what's sort of what's going on here. So, and there's some of the other names, and we're not going to go through who these people are, but yeah, various people that I work with, they went to school together or know them or something to that effect. But Powell came in 2018, and the politics of when these positions are up for grabs. Well, that's for another lecture. There's a vice chair who's also the president of the Federal Reserve in New York, John Williams, and he also took office in 2018. And there's some other, the second district, which is the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The president of the Federal Reserve Bank serves continuously, while the presidents of the other reserve banks are on 1 or 3 year rotating schedules. Okay, except for Cleveland, Chicago, which rotates on it too. So yeah, it gets all right. If you care about stuff like this, for the bureaucrats out there, knock yourself out with that. And there's the 4 rotating seats are based on one from Boston, Philadelphia, Richmond, one from Cleveland or Chicago, one from St. Louis, Dallas, or Atlanta, and one from Kansas City, Minneapolis, and San Francisco. Okay, and these are the names of some of these folks, and I care about what it does. This is a little more the politics of, like I said, you can look up all the backgrounds, where they worked, where they went to school, what they studied, if they've written books or something like that. You can certainly look at all the backgrounds of those folks. Again, there's 8 regularly scheduled meetings. They can meet more often if it has to meet more often, it will. They're not held in public, but believe me, but it's like you're there. I mean, it's really the timing of it. Okay, the minutes of the meeting are sort of very formally disclosed, so it's almost like you're there. And if you look on the websites, you can find the minutes of the Federal Open Market Committee meetings that go back to the 30s. Okay, they go back a very long way. So it's a nice research. Believe me, if someone's looking for a research area, it's a nice research area. There's always a lot of speculation about what's happening here, and what will happen to the money supply, what will happen to interest rates, and there was really the money supply determines. Obviously, if there's more loans, you're going to have a declining interest rate. Okay, if you're having the banks buy, the central bank obviously would be selling the securities. So the central banks would be buying them. So obviously the capital goes back into the central bank, and it diminishes what the commercial banks can lend out. Okay, so if you reduce the money supply in the commercial banks, you're going to increase interest rates effectively. Right? There's local and global. Obviously, there's developments in local and global financial markets and economic and financial forecasts. And if you look at sort of the notes that I gave you guys, all those areas are covered in the notes. And it says the board of governors and the 12 reserve bank presidents share the views on the country's economic stance, and conversely, and talk about monetary policy that would be most beneficial to the country. Look, I'm sure it's become a very political exercise. The real conversations happen in private behind the scenes. I seriously, this is almost, at this point, this is almost a formality where, God forbid, if there was some sort of dissent or someone said, "Oh, I disagree with what we're doing here," you wouldn't really hear, you wouldn't get a transcript of that. So it's as if the deliberation happens back at the office, at the meeting. It's just sort of for the public. It's something for the public to digest, sort of the results of our debate. Okay, which is really what's important there. So. And these things, the open market, again, I didn't spend a lot of time on this, but they adjust the discount rates at bank reserve requirements, and this all controls the money supply. But the discount rates, this is an important piece of what's going on. The discount rate is that the commercial banks buying or borrowing reserves from the central bank, which is a discouraged activity. It's better. The federal funds rate is commercial banks borrowing excess reserves from one another. That's the more sort of accepted version of things. Discount rate reserve requirements, again, and the FOMC is in charge of open market operations, which entails buying and selling government securities. Now, this is going to repeat what I just said, but to tighten monetary money supply and decrease the amount available in the banking system, the Fed will offer government securities for sale. Because in other words, that's how the Federal Reserve retracts money from the commercial banks, it's by selling securities. So that's what I mean by federal open market operations. And this is how. So obviously, the Federal Reserve has to just behave like a JP Morgan, has to behave like an investment banker selling these securities out there for the commercial banks, for their commercial bank customers. And there's a portfolio, and it holds treasuries, federal agency securities. There's foreign instruments in there. So the foreign portfolio holds investments denominated in euros and Japanese yen. It holds currency from other parts of the world, all of those kinds of things. And there's a couple pieces of legislation here: the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, the Monetary Control Act of 1980. Okay, where we do go into that in a little more detail in other lectures. Um, Yeah, so again, so these acts of Congress, grant these federal agencies the power to do what they're doing, which is an important piece of what's going on here. The process, again, with the results of the meetings being communicated to the SMOA, which is what that is, and we've discussed that in previous incarnations of all this, which is right here. So the open market account is really what that is. I should probably highlight that. Okay. And the manager relays the transactions to the trading desk of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and then conducts transactions of run securities in the open market until the mandate is until they carry out their instructions. And if you look at the end of the minutes and the press releases for the 8 annual meetings, you'll see what the instructions are. And then the open market committee, using its account, using the system open market account, buys and sells the securities based on the instructions they're given from the open market committee. The federal funds rate is the rate at which depository institutions lend their balance. I just said that to other banks on an overnight basis. It directly influences short-term rates and indirectly influences long-term rates, foreign exchange rates, and supply of credit, and the demand for investment, employment, and economic output. So yeah, what is it? What does it influence? Right, here's again. Let's underline all the influences here: short-term rates, long-term rates, foreign exchange rates are influenced. So supply of credit, demand for investment, employment, economic output. Okay. Now this is whenever this is whenever this was written. Someone's referenced the 2019 meetings or whatever they are. Um, but this you'll always, what are the statement of longer run goals? It's going to be the same thing. Full employment, stable prices, inflation 2% target. You're going to read that over and over again. And then you look at the median of the participants' estimates of longer run normal unemployment rates. And yeah, it's the summary of economic projections is the big part of this. And again, we'll have that discussion. I just wanted to sort of formally go over what the FOMC was. And again, here it's the statement is based on the FOMC's commitment to fulfilling statutory mandate from Congress to promote maximum employment, stable prices, moderate long-term interest rates. Because monetary policy determines inflation rate over longer term, the FOMC can specify longer run goal for inflation. And there's always that reference to the 2% target, which if you're reading the literature now, people are feeling that maybe 3% might be more realistic. Okay, but again, there's a legal mandate or a legal instruction from the Congress as sort of what we expect from this. Okay, so there you go. So we initially spoke about the Federal Reserve System. So now we talked about the Federal Open Market Committee. We did that. So we have the two of the most important things I wanted to take care of here. We have those boxes sort of checked off. The interest rates and all that, I want to get to that. So our next data set, I wanted to go over the crude prices for West Texas Intermediate. And did I do a daily with this? I may have done a daily. Yeah, it looks like I did a daily with this. So again, it'll be another exercise in picking up some data from a couple of years ago. We can certainly go to the St. Louis Fed, but also just to give you guys a little bit of background here. We're here. Yeah, I was sent this email. It says Saudi Arabia and other oil giants announced surprise production cuts. So very much similar to the supply of money, or the supply of capital to commercial banks, the supply of oil. Folks, let me tell you, my opinion on this green initiative and all these. Of course, we want a cleaner world, clean atmosphere, low pollution, no pollution, healthier, you know, clean, healthy water supply, all the environment. I have all the environmental concerns that any reasonable person would have and would want. But are we there yet? That's really what the issue is. Are we there? Is you think I've said this in class. Think of your phone. How long your phone has a tiny little battery and it takes 2 hours. Mine would take about 2 hours to charge. The car charging can take a while. How fast? Actually, I've been cut off by a couple Teslas driving around, and I still have a combustion engine. But you know, are we there yet? That's really what we care about. But here, I just want to give you guys just a little bit of an oil lecture here as best we can, just using this from the Associated Press. And actually, you know what? And here, maybe it's good you see me sort of unwind this a bit. It's important that you guys see sort of how I do everything that I do. Here, we can do this. This came out Sunday. What was Sunday's date? The second, right? So we can go to this thing. Dubai is like the safe place to have meetings and things that OPEC has their meetings there. The Godiva will, because it's Easter week, so let's not worry about that. That's another lecture we could worry about the Godiva chocolates and whatever it might be. Worry about that another time. There's some comments from the energy minute, but this is how you break down a press release. You look through it and sort of where's the data and all these other kinds of things. Okay, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to pull it out of there. Um, here we have holding company. Here, I'm gonna just shoehorn this to sort of the end of this, for better or worse. We'll just shoehorn this into there. Okay, so we have a couple pages here that we can just quickly sort of run through this. It says the soils of the giants. Now, as you're going through this, you always want to have an idea of relative size of the numbers that are being discussed here, and why this is coming out of the Arab Emirates. And you want to look at, like, who are the big oil producers? Russia, us, Mexico, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, all the, then it's natural gas, crude oil, different petroleum products. So you now, again, I'm just giving you sort of what you would need to know in terms of the petroleum industry. And folks, I'm telling you, this is going to be an important area for a while. Hopefully we get a little bit saner, federal leadership on these ideas. Of course, we want a cleaner environment. Of course, we don't want to endanger the people in Pennsylvania and the people in South Dakota, or whatever it might be. Of course, we don't want to start endangering people by mining opera, because basically, ExxonMobil and all these big oil companies and Chevron or whatever it is, they're mining companies is what they are. Upstream, down. You want the terminology. So these major oil producers said they're going to cut 1.5 million barrels a day from May until the end of the year. So you want some gauge on that. Is that a lot? Is that a little? And we'll look at what America uses. So now there's a global market for energy. There's a global market for oil. There's a global market for natural gas. So we're big producers of energy. We're big users of energy in this country. And the more energy you use and produce, it furthers your society along. It's a richer society. It's a more developed society. So these are important issues. I think, unfortunately, what happens is, and I don't, it's not so bad. I think a lot of people who have very strong opinions about things are living in very comfortable suburbs and saying, "Oh, well, who needs this?" And it becomes a very idyllic, ideological world, as opposed to what's really going on. So we're gonna judge the magnitude of by, let's say, a million barrels a day, of crude oil, and what the impact of that is going to be. Higher oil. Now, certainly, just like as we were talking about with interest rates, and you start altering the supply of money, you have less supply, loans are scarcer, there's a higher interest rate, so it costs more to have a loan, credit is more expensive and things of that nature. When you reduce the supply of crude oil, obviously you're going to have higher prices. Again, if you think of the supply and demand, which I know I didn't actually go through those particular curves, what you're having is you're having a shifting of the supply curve from sort of the lower right to the upper left a little bit. And as you do that, you have a higher price and lower quantity for theoretically the same demand curve. Okay, which is, and certainly what happens there when you have that higher price and you move you have a fixed demand curve and you're shifting the supply curve along that negative slope demand curve, you're limiting, people are going to be using less because it costs more. All right. So you're moving up the demand curve because of the supply chain, because of the infrastructure change or the fundamental change in the industry of having less supply. It says, and this would help fill now, if you're selling all that you can produce, which I guess what the assumption is here, it says, higher oil prices are going to help the Russians, right? The old enemy from the 80s, right? It says as the country's wages war in Ukraine and forces Americans and others to pay even more at the pump amid worldwide inflation. So there's prices at the pump, there's oil prices, there's inflation. So this is all of this is very, this is all very interrelated. Okay, interrelate in a big way, So if the crude oil costs more, when you roll into the Exxon station, the retail part of things, obviously you're going to be paying more there. And this could further strain ties with the United States. But again, if we were energy independent, we wouldn't be worrying so much. We wouldn't be at the mercy of a Saudi Arabia. We wouldn't be at the mercy of Russia. But that's the federal policy right now. Do I think it's a good federal policy? No. And again, it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Okay, it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has something to do with sound economic thinking, and he was just supporting it. Is basically what he was doing. It says the United States, which called Saudi Arabia and other allies to increase production, as it tries to bring down prices and squeeze Russia's. But again, if the Saudi Arabians and whoever agree with the Russians more than us, but again, who needs who and who's our ally out? Who's our military ally out in the world? So there's all this. There's a lot of interplaying of what's going down here. So obviously there's a war with Russia, or Russia's fighting the Ukrainians and over territory and all these other kinds of things, and who's supporting who. And it says now certainly production is a big part of what's going on here. We could even read these out a bit. The production to have it act like that supply. It's just so demand is blue, supply is red. Yeah, and so people did the math on this, and it could push up prices at the pump. The United States prices in the United States of gasoline at the pump by 26 cents. So if it's $3 a gallon, that's 8%. That's about an 8% change in prices over all this, over this act, over Saudi Arabia reducing supply by 1 million barrels a day. And again, we're gonna run to the EIA website, and we're gonna take a look at what we use every day and what we produce, and all those numbers are in there, folks. But I'll tell you, a lot of the people who are energy analysts and petroleum analysts, they're chemists or physicists or engineers. The terminology is generally not discussed, and I've gotten away from talking about the oil industry. I probably have to get back to that a little bit because I have so many things I want to talk to you guys about. And it's hard to just, we're just going to do oil, or we're just going to do finance, or we're just going to do banking, or we're just going to do some accounting models, or whatever it might be. I have more stuff to tell you than I have time to. And I remember saying that my first year of teaching, saying something to that effect. But it says, so gasoline prices would obviously increase. So the production cuts would cause about an 8% change in gas price as of today's prices, with that about saying about $3 a gallon. And then you have people, Clearview Energy Partners is probably a consulting firm that manages the data and explaining it to people and what it means. And British Thermal Units, which is an energy, it's an old energy unit, but it's an energy unit like joules. But again, if you're not really a physics guy, all that terminology can, cubic meters of natural gas and dollars per gallon, and how many, what's the volume of these barrels of crude. So you're juggling a lot of dimension. You're juggling a lot of terminology that may not be just so obvious to just everybody who's not a chemistry person or physics person or an engineering person. It says the Energy Department calculates a seasonal increase on an average of 32 cents per gallon. Okay, so again, people did the math on the reduction of that supply and what they think that's going to mean just based on past behavior of all of us in America. So, and here, just to sort of break the ice with this thing, I clicked. It's the EIA is what this is. Actually, this is the Energy Outlook here. Here, let's get to this. So EIA, it's the U.S. U.S. Energy Information Administration, and there's another one too out there. There's IAE or something. There's an international one, but this is the U.S. one. What the problem here is. Yeah, there it is. I don't know why these searches came up wrong like that, but there you go. It says U.S. production petroleum outlook to be driven by, okay, when is it not? Okay, but this has uh, crude oil prices per barrel, natural gas futures prices. This is measured in energy, and so I could do a course on how to and I might do that at some point. How to navigate this page. Maybe even in the fall, we'll see what happens. But this is, and it talks about net exports. There's projections here. So we see these simple, relatively simple little graphs here. A lot of work goes into these projections, but there's a lot of stuff you can read here. You can just click on there and anything. There's an annual report about the petroleum industry, the energy industry, some good educational cartoons, who some of these folks are. But this is just like the central bank, or just like the central bank sites or the Federal Reserve sites are good for banking and central banking. This is good for understanding coal production and retail diesel prices, and retail gasoline prices, and from a week earlier how much it's changed. From 8 cents a week earlier, and it's down 67 cents from a year ago. But we're anticipating this might be going up for the summer driving season, and reduced in production, things of that nature. But coal production, diesel production, gasoline production, natural gas prices, crude oil futures, futures prices means what we think is going to be in a month or in a year or 6 months or something, 90 days or whatever. Something, there's a monthly newsletter. So there's a lot of stuff here that's just free. And let me tell you something, if you're an expert at this stuff, you're going to be quite useful if you really understand all of this. Okay, but we're going to get back to this. We're going to get back to this in a little bit. But yes, I looked at some of the this is current issues and how the weather impacts everything. But you can see there's a lot of graphs. So all the things that we do in my, as you can see, there's a lot of historical sort of data topics here, going back to 2015, 2016, going back a long time. All right, so you guys can really you can really educate yourself if you sit there and read through all of this. Okay, but we'll get to this. We'll get to this. That's the price in the markets. Yeah, actually, this thing I wanted to talk about. This is the energy outlook for 2023. We're going to briefly run. There's 25 slides here. We're going to briefly run through this, and then we'll make our graph. This is the market price for West Texas Intermediate. I think it is. Is that what that is? The price of crude. The spot price. Yeah, the data is here. Okay, the data is here. So, and you can see it does it every day. 320, 321, and you have it up to about a week ago. And then you have the historical prices. So you're about $72 per gallon. And then you look at it says crude oil in dollars per barrel, products in dollars per gallon. Okay, how much we use, how much we make, the regions, the European prices, which are generally not that different. And then you can go back to the 1980s historically, and you could do graphs and projections. You could do all sorts of things. Okay, you can do all sorts of things here. Yeah, but this overview or this is analysis of projections. What does the overview page look like? Yeah, this is the overview, heating oil. Well, like I said, I'm just throwing this out at you guys, but there's a lot to this, and it's not so simple. So just making you guys aware of that. So it's production change. Okay, fine. It says U.S. average price now is about $3.50 according to AAA. They didn't say according to EIA. They sort of according to AAA of regular gasoline. This is U.S. price now. The U.S. price now. Let's compare that to what we just found online. So that's 350 barrel per gallon. Yeah, retail gasoline price April 3rd about 349. Yeah, 350. So there you go. So you're making the connection between where they got the data from. Now I don't know why they didn't just reference the U.S. Energy Information Administration. I don't know why they didn't. Are these guys in Washington? Probably are. USEIA. Yeah, well, of course, Washington, D.C., and they were formed in the 70s. Okay, they were formed in the 70s. What happened to Trump? What happened to Trump? Let's see. Is he? Do we have him? Does the press have him convicted yet? I don't know if he's convicted yet or being arraigned or whatever. Fine. Okay, former president. All right. Well, we'll get to this. We'll get to this. Let's not worry about this right now. But yeah, so we confirm that price, and then again, if we're predicting going up by 26 cents, and then with summer driving, you could be looking at $4 a gallon potentially in the summers. That's a projection coming out of this. There's complex variables in the oil and gas prices, the size of, and here we go. It says the size of the country's production cut depends on baseline production numbers it's using. So the cut might not be 1.15 million. It could take much of the year for the cuts to take effect. Demand could fall if the U.S. enters a recession precipitated by the banking crisis, but it could also increase during the summer as more people travel. Okay, so again, so this is it's a great economics sort of lecture here because it talks about demand, it talks about supply. Okay, so again, so are we entering a recession? Are people driving more? The impact of the banking crisis. So you can see there's a lot of forces that involve our decision as to how to drive more or what we're going to do here. Okay, and not just worry now. I'm not saying that if you're energy independent, I'm not saying you don't worry about what Saudi Arabia or Russia are doing, but certainly there's more of an impact when you're buying internationally from other people than if you're just producing it yourself in Pennsylvania or South Dakota or Texas or whatever it might be. Okay, that's why that's a big deal. Okay, it's not for political reasons, it's for security of this nation. So, and the production cuts only 1% of the roughly 100 million barrels of oil. Okay, the world uses, so there you go. The world uses 100 million barrels of oil per day. Right there. What's the world's use, right? The demand. That says that the impact on prices could be big. Okay, but that's the world demand for oil, and we use about a quarter of that, I think. About right, I think we're about 20 million barrels a day, just us somehow. I think. So let's find the where is it? It's data. It's this. Yeah, here it is. I think it was at the end of this. For natural gas, petroleum. Yeah, we're in the 20 millions of barrels, and and then again, it starts if your account starts, low growth, reference, high oil and gas supply, low growth, whatever these are, and it says obviously in terms of this, in terms of production, if supply is being reduced, they're going to produce less, kind of a situation. Okay, and you can't buy what you can't afford, or what if the gas pump is empty, right? And then you're talking about exports, what we're exporting. So I mean, again, looking at this, it says again, the United States is we're exporting whatever it is, 5 million barrels a day that we're exporting, and it says yeah, the United States will remain a net exporter. So if you listen to the right, they say, oh well, we're not energy independent, we're not this, but it looks like we're still a net exporter of petroleum products. It appears if you go by this, if you go with people with the data. Okay, and myself included, I can get fooled by the media too because I'm not studying every little number here, all the time, every day. How much this has changed. So, for the next whatever 30 years, it's anticipated that we'll be net exporters of petroleum products through 2050 at least, which is one hell of a projection to go 30 years into the future. This is for petroleum products. This is natural gas. They didn't do, see, this is general. They said petroleum and other liquids. So this is natural gas, all this is, petroleum products, which is a rather large umbrella. Okay. This is liquefied natural gas exports, driving production, domestic consumption, stable. So again, natural gas consumption, the home, grills in the back, heating, the kitchens, all that stuff. So that's natural gas consumption. And this is not measured in barrels. See, this is barrels per day. This is measured in trillions of cubic feet. And you got to be able to conceptualize a cubic foot and a trillion of them and what all that means. Okay, but also we're still a net exporter of natural gas. Okay, and we're still producing, and it doesn't look like it's falling off of a cliff anytime soon. Okay, and I don't know, New York and New York State, if you build a new house, you can't have a gas stove. But anybody who cooks out there knows, what you can do with an electric stove? Heat up coffee. Okay, you need fire to cook. Okay, you need fire to cook. Anybody who's learning how to cook out there, you need fire to cook. Okay, so these are just some of the statistics that are out there. You guys can get through this stuff yourself, and it talks about emissions and the vehicle. This is light duty, and it really breaks it up into average energy intensity. It breaks electricity use. It breaks it up into real physics terms: industrial use, transportation use, residential use, commercial use. All these it goes through all these different areas. Battery storage and solar, wind generation. It should make them obviously more of the electricity by in 30 years. Well, as we wait for the power demand is increasing by renewables. Okay, installed generating capacity more than doubles across most scenarios. And as you're looking at this, I have to look up zero carbon technology, ZTC zero carbon technology, and then the different sort of scenarios of how the economy is behaving and what the energy use based on the prediction of how the economy is going to behave. But like I said, as you go through all these, there's a lot of good stuff here, energy related. And notice how the first stuff was about emissions, nothing but emissions, right? There you go. Growth and also uh, again projecting out 30 years, I guess figuring the high of oil would be $190 a barrel, the low would be 51. This is the Brent crude, not the West Texas Intermediate. This is the Brent. It's a different measure. Okay, the one we had or the one we looked at was West Texas Intermediate. But I think Brent is the European reference point somehow. Okay, so again, let's get back to that article. So we have some idea of the usage here, the way oil prices work. You're in the market is relatively balanced. Take a small amount away, depending on what demand does. You can have very significant, have a price response. Again, how does the supply and demand curve respond? Okay, that's what this guy's talking about. Okay. It's a very balanced market. Saudi Arabia announced the cuts over the OPEC meeting among the 500 members of OPEC. I'm saying Saudi Arabia announced they're going to reduce by 500 million barrels a day, 500,000 barrels a day, which is half of a million. In addition to a reduction announced last October that infuriated the Biden administration. Well, I mean, I thought the adults were back in the room. That's what I thought the politicians had said when the Biden team, allegedly won that election, right? They had said, hey, we're back. Well, there you are. There's the results of we're back. So, what else here? Energy precautionary measure aimed at stabilizing the oil market. And the cuts represent less than 5% of the average production of a. So now again, what Saudi Arabia produces. So if the world uses 100 million, Saudi Arabia produces about 10% of that, right? It's a Saudi Arabia's average production per day. It says it right there. That's 10% of what the world needs is produced in that one country. Iraq would reduce production by 200,000 barrels a day. The UAE by 144, Kuwait by 128. So I guess adding all of this up adds up to Oman, right? Adds up to a million less barrels produced a day, which is a 1% change in what's demanded by the world every day. Oman by that. Those are all Middle Eastern countries. Russia's not a part of OPEC. It says because they're so gigantic, they don't need to be. Neither are we. It says would extend a voluntary cut by 500,000 barrels by the end of the year. Good luck with that. By the state news agency, Russia announced unilateral reduction in February after Western countries imposed price caps. Well, see again, if a Western company imposes price, let's just take the world as petroleum. Let's not worry about natural gas and let's not worry about that stuff. And and you're reducing supply. Okay, that's a response to a price cap, because if the market wants if the market bids up the price a little higher and you're capping at a certain amount, the producers aren't going to produce, and where the market's demanding a higher price, they're not going to accept a low price, so they're just not going to spend on producing it any longer, and that's really what you're seeing here. So a price cap means you're below equilibrium. So if how America has now, certainly being the strongest military country, all these things, says, okay, well, globally, America's and using of the global demand, that we're 1/5 of what the world. So obviously we have a big say so in terms of the market for this stuff. If we're not going to pay past a certain amount, we're not going to produce past a certain amount. And then you have, you know, you have the economic tug of war that's happening here. So this is OPEC plus the group of oil exporting countries, which includes the Organization for Petroleum, as well as Russia and other producers. There was no immediate statement from OPEC itself, and the cuts announced in October, some 2 million overall 2 million barrels a day, had come on the eve of midterm elections, which are storing prices were a major issue. Yeah, so there were other cuts announced, I guess, in the fall to have, I guess, to have some sort of impact on the midterm elections, which didn't seem to really maybe have the desired effect. It says there be consequences, and Democratic lawmakers call for freezing cooperation with the Saudis. Again, I guess this is how the adults are back in the room by doing. We didn't have this when Trump was in, that's for sure. The U.S. inserted denied political motives in the dispute. Okay. And says those cuts, oil prices have trended down. Brent crude, the global benchmark, was trading around $80 a barrel as of last week, down from around 95 in early October when earlier cuts were agreed. So again, let's take it. So this is Brent crude, which is the European benchmark, and let's look at that cover page and see what do we have here. Yeah, this is West Texas Intermediate. We're at 80 a barrel, right? And where are we with here? Where are we here? 80 a barrel, down from 95 earlier. So again, so we're in the ballpark of yeah. So here's the $80 a barrel last week. Okay, which is right there. So it's similar. If you look at West Texas Intermediate and you look at the Brent crude prices, it's not going to be dramatically different or too different. Where's the spot prices? Yeah, here's the Brent numbers here. So yeah, this is the European one. So yeah, so here's where what they say 76 or whatever is in the 70s. Yeah, Brent was 80 at the end of last week. Yeah, 76 or whatever it might be. And this is a couple days short of that. Okay, but you guys can look that up. Analysts at Jefferies or whatever, so the new cuts should allow for material reduction in the inventory earlier than expected and could validate recent warnings of some traders and analysts. Demand for oil is weakening. And now you're going to get some comments. This is Rice University's Institute for Public Policy. The study is determined to keep oil prices high enough to fund ambitious mega projects linked to the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's vision for 2030, plan to overhaul the economy. The domestic interest takes precedence in Saudi decision-making over relationships with international partners and is likely to remain a point of friction with the U.S.-Saudi relationships for the foreseeable future. So yeah, so you have some of the political commentary here now, and it says the state-run Aramco announced record profits of 161 billion, and profits rose 46% when compared to the company's 2021 results of 110 billion. So obviously these inflation is exaggerated or enhanced profits dramatically in the petroleum industry, and it hoped to boost production to 13 million barrels a day by 2027. So again, so you have some sense of what's going on here and who's an important player. So again, so just looking from this, we're getting the percentages of this country, us, us as users, us as producers, type of a situation, and we're still net exporters of petroleum products, believe it or not. And then obviously, and believe me, there's a very deep alliance with us in Saudi Arabia that's going to withstand Joe Biden. That's going to withstand Donald Trump and withstand a lot of these things. And there was a dissident that was disappeared somewhere in I think Turkey or something like that. And there was war with Yemen and just some of these sort of political wranglings or straining relationships between us and the Saudi Arabia's. A candidate for president is about to make Saudi Arabia again. That doesn't sound like the adults are back in the room, right? But those kinds of comments towards the Saudis. But it says oil prices rose after his inauguration. He backed off. He visited with the Kingdom of Shawn, a bit to patch up relations, during criticism for sharing a fist bump. Well, again, yeah, meaning that was too Western. You should have shook hands or bowed or whatever they do in that part of the world. Okay, and so Saudi Arabia has denied siding with the Russians in the Ukrainian war, even though it's cultivated closer ties with both Moscow and Beijing in recent years. Saudi Aramco announced billions of dollars in investment in China's downstream petroleum Downstream means processing, is what that means. Upstream means mining. So, all right. So again, so you had a little background with this, and here just to sort of close out what we're talking about today. Um, we can use this data if you wanted to. We could click on it on the West Texas Intermediate, and you could see, and you can download it into Excel. But they have a daily measure by the day and by the week. So you can take Friday prices, Thursday prices, Wednesday prices. So obviously, in the 80s, it was $26 a barrel, and now we're up to, what are we up to now? We're up to, well, okay, in the 80s, but still, it was 100. Right, in 2022 it was 100. Right, so those were big, and it was 100 at some other time too, probably in '08 or something like that. It was probably 100. We had big oil prices during the financial crisis years, 70s, so 80, yeah, you were 98 in 2007. Yeah, there, yeah, you had a bunch of '08 was 139. Okay, so like I said, so you can really go back in time and look at the behavior of oil prices and then match it with the news. You could say, well, what events happened in 1988? What events happened in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010? What are the events that happened? Were there wars? What was going on? But certainly you've had a pretty good fluctuation with this. We could get the data from here, but I'm just going to go to the St. Louis Fed, if you guys don't mind. St. Louis Fed oil prices. Yeah, they do the spot price of West, and that's for our purposes. That's good enough for our purposes. We could get the West Texas Intermediate prices, which are right here, and we can alter this to the beginning of 2018, January the 1st. You could do. We'll do a daily price. I don't know what this negative is here. Yeah, I don't know what that means. We're getting the oil for free. I don't know if that's really what happened there. We have to take a figure out why that was. Why was that? I don't know why that was. But yeah, so the data is here. Okay, and then so we went back to the first, and this is crude oil prices, West Texas Intermediate, Cushing, Oklahoma. You could do the Brent prices also, and you can download this into Excel. This is the download. Sorry about this. Is the download. The West Texas Intermediate, and I'm hoping that we don't we have to go through this again and get. Do we? Let's see. All those zeros. Yeah. Again, why is it that they're putting these? Do we have to go through? Yeah, we got to do it again, unfortunately. So, folks, forgive me for having to put you through this again with this, with going through and fishing through all of this stuff. But it's just a part of it, right? Remember this thing in class went through the data and everything. There was whatever all the different holidays that didn't have a reading. Again, why these aren't eliminated, I'll never know. But I know. I said. Do I say it every time? I know you can count the number of times I said that. So. Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever, New Year's, New Year's Eve. So that there's more holidays with these guys. It seems like. Almost through all these, right? Almost these two. Whoops. So we're there. Yeah, folks, 2020, it seems like, it's like, it felt like yesterday, but it's really that's a third of a decade ago, 2020 at this point. So a lot of time has passed since that vi whatever happened, COVID, whatever the hell happened with that. Or some time has passed, that's for sure. Okay, delete. Alright, so we have up to, March 27th, right? We're gonna come in here, we're gonna parachute all these numbers into this, just the values, okay? Then I'm sure we have to go down to the bottom here, and we have to, yeah, bring the formatting down with us. So we're gonna bring this there. We're gonna bring the formatting down. This is just the formatting, so we have the dates. So there you go. Okay. You have the behavior. You have 1,300 pieces of data of oil price behavior. Okay. And what you can do is you can clear out the shading. You can clear out the borders. You can clear out a lot of that stuff. Now, this is just US dollar. It says US dollars. And now, and also, we're fortunate in the sense where you have some graphics here somewhere. Yeah, yeah, there's a graph. So you could just take the S&P and just graph that. Okay, you can just take the S&P, just graph that. And so, and here, the dollar change, right? The current price minus the previous price, whatever the formatting on this is, it's accounting. And again, you can just go down and do all 1,300. E, $3, down $3, up $3. You can see all, and again, the volatility of this, we care about how volatile this is. We care about that. And convert this to a percentage. You take the delta divided by the price, right? And then you get this is a percentage. All right, and you can see how volatile, 3% by as a percentage. And is it, well, I mean, let's look, this is generally pretty volatile. So I'm looking at the prices here. It seems to be in the range of what it's been. I'm seeing even a couple years ago, I'm seeing 4 or 5% changes in the day, and or 1 or 0.5%. So we're looking, we're seeing a similar. I'm just sort of eyeballing these. We're seeing a similar percentage change. But here, we can do this. We can do insert, scatter. There. Again, I don't know what this dip is. I think that this was the COVID. I think you had some big COVID movement. Let's go back to 2020. Yeah, minus 20. Yeah, yeah, you had a minus 24%, and some of this. So yes, you had some big movements here. Minus 24 there, minus 24 there, 45. Yeah, so you had big swings around what was going on with COVID. That's for sure. Like I said, but with this, you want this to, you're going to want to connect this to the, but this is minus 300 though, right? So here, let's fix the dates on this thing. design. There's the first one, which is there. Let's do select data, edit. And you can flip these things a bit. Line -5. Instead of every couple years, you could do 300, something like that. Layout, legend, top. Yes, that was in 20. So you're down to minus 300% in 2020. Let's see. Whoops. Yeah, you did have that. You had big swings here for I don't know what this negative. Yeah, I might just these are I might just pull these out somehow. I don't know what that is, what that means. So when you have something like that, you can do that. Yeah, so you don't have those crazy movements anymore, and that's yeah, that's an outlier, and in statistics you learn how to sort of manipulate that, but that's an outlier. So yeah, so there's your chart for the volatility of oil prices, which we care about here. Put that here. We'll make let's make this the chart that we're using the volatility. Okay, let's do that. All the identification stuff is up here. So this is really change crude oil prices. And this you want maybe just make that a little bit smaller, something like that, right? You could put a border around this thing if you want. Like, whoops. Okay, right, whatever. Border. All right. These are the days. This is day over day change. Which is what that is. You could maybe make these 10% change instead of 20% change. Make it a 10. But yeah, so this is the volatility, which I was again a colleague of mine asked about this. Format the area, shadow, do a shadow in there, fill, do a very light fill. And with the grid lines, you can do thin it dash. Very thin on the lines. But there's your volatility. That's the daily percentage change. And you can go into this and just say, here's your volatility. Okay. You could do prices. You could do, and actually, we'll go through. We'll look at the average change to see if it's. But obviously, during COVID, you had a big swing of this stuff, compared to sort of the daily movements of this. We had the federal funds rate. We had a lot of that stuff. Okay. You can do, instead of 300, you can do 200 days. Even better than that, you can do 90 days. You can make those smaller, make these smaller. Actually, you don't need 2 decimal places here. Number, you can do 1 decimal place. Right? Look at that. Okay, so you have a crude oil day-over-day percentage change. This is West Texas Intermediate. Okay. You have how much that, obviously, it's and pre-Trump, you've had it maybe a little more volatile in 2022, right? At the beginning, it's a bit more volatile. You see a little bit of a thicker band here. So we don't need. I should clear that out. Yeah, and we're not going to go bananas worrying about, you know, did we match up with the other years or something? We're not going to worry too much about that. So we're going to take the formatting from this. We'll go to the end of January here. Man, for the first one, we seem okay with it. But believe me, there'll be a change somewhere. So equals average percentage. Equals average. All right, so for January 2018, the average volatility was about 0.5%, about 22 cents was the average volatility. Right, not too different, and the volatility changes. Right? And then you can sort of do a recent version of this: 22 cents, 18 cents. Yeah, so February, you didn't have crazy changes in February, and let's see what happened in March. No. Yeah, you didn't have wild swings either. So in March, so it's like I said. So you can gauge your volatility. Right, as you wish here. So this is going to be right there, and this is going to be up here. Actually, the volatility in December was almost non-existent. So I don't know if that's on purpose, but we cleared out. And like I said, you guys can go through and do the same thing. Check the average monthly volatility, because that's an important measure. Okay. So what'd you do here? You took the average of the data points, right? You took of just that month. You took the average dollar change. You took the average percentage change. That's all you did. And that's your array, right? That's your array, is what that is. And then you could graph the prices, but we graph the volatility because, like I said, because you can look at um, the data here. This is telling you the price, how the price moves. So at least you have a visual on it. You could do this yourself. Again, if you do your own reports, you should really do that yourself. But always take out some oddball thing. You want to go back to the media of the day and figure out why in April 2020, why it became negative. Were the oil companies giving oil away? I don't know if that's really what was going on. Okay, so it looks like we hit everything, right? That I wanted to talk about here, right? So we did the Federal Open Market Committee, we did the economics article, and we did a little sort of a little bit of a bonus lecture on oil, just so you guys have some idea of the Saudi Arabian oil prices and the barrel a day and the EIA, the usage of that website. I'll just put that in there somehow that we discussed that. Yeah. So it's USEI. I'll put that in there to USEI, Energy Information Administration. Okay. All right, folks. Number 7. Now, so next time we hit these, we're going to do inflation, inflation and interest rates, and we'll pick some other topics to put in there. But folks, thank you very much.